When I think back on the recent history regarding music coverage on this channel, it's funny to see how many points of overlap are emerging between different artists on account now of geographical areas. Because I think if the intention of this song on Message, and it's pretty direct, and I'm actually really excited to humor it, because it does fall into a path of relevancy among some other very recent American works on a social commentary side, especially on a subject that I would say the world is all at a point of consideration over to different respects, and I admire songs of depth. Now, perhaps, and I can say this even broader than music, I appreciate social commentary and songs with that type of writing perspective and social relevancy if permitted, on a grand scale and part of other artistic forms as well. But we have to judge, because I've seen maybe social commentary done well and done inferior in other cases to other works, right? You have to judge the product on efficacy when you humor it for the first time. And we're about to do that with XANDRIA. But I would imagine it's going to be as exquisite and I haven't looked at the lyrics in depth, but probably as faithful in articulation and as deep as other tracks I've considered along those same lines. Let's say, for example, just to pick out a couple tracks and be following that path, the Plot and Use Divide, I love that one, as well as Zana, I love her, big fan of her work. She's a emerging Christian metal artist, or rock and metal if you're not familiar, highly recommend her. And I haven't yet published all my, as far as I'm sitting here, maybe the videos we published at this point, I don't know exactly. I have yet to publish the extensive amount of coverage I've given her work, in part to advertise such talents if I can and promote her name, because I think she definitely deserves an audience, and I hope you check her out as well on part of Divided Nation. I loved that song, and it's certainly, again, like I said, those two aren't the only examples. Divided Nation, though, is so well written in my opinion. It's a great energetic rock number. But there's been others that have floated in that territory. Fallen in Reverse has done some as well that follow that path. And there's been other groups, perhaps I'm forgetting, that I'll attribute and post at the moment. I'm interested to see the depth of XANDRIA's envisionment, especially perhaps from a global perspective, given that I haven't humored social commentary on the, totalitarian state of the world, perhaps, in a European respect. That could be quite interesting. We'll see. I'm sure the music will be enticing enough now that I've had 2 introductions to XANDRIA thus far. And as another exquisite European metal talent, I can't get enough of this, of course, as many of you know, especially in the symphonic metal scene, and the dimension that this group has just has impressed me at this point in the evolution of what we've entertained on The Wonder Still Awaiting. Reborn and Two Worlds, in that order of what I've covered, are just exquisite pieces of music, generally speaking, and on writing they're entertaining too. And I do wonder, again, like I said, if there's a thread emerging if there's a general storyline to The Wonder Still Awaiting, because Two Worlds kind of dipped into at least some aspects of relevancy with the lyrics here as I kind of look over, just on point again of that energy. Because You Will Never Be Our God, to state it outright, is, if you want the intention of the song, it's based on, from my understanding, looking at the Tuon Ma magazine, I'm probably getting the pronunciation of that wrong, and I apologize if so, but they cite it as a song speaking of government manipulation. Who couldn't relate to that these days? And, I try and avoid politics on this channel like the plague. I don't mind I used to be like a big political guy. I don't miss those days. I despise it now. Politics can just be so draining. But again, songs of depth and construction, I admire good writing. And there's points to mention, especially I would say in regards to just the state of the world and perhaps our relationships with our fellow men and women around, just in our company. The state of the world, to me at least speaking as an American, in that sphere, I don't know what it is in Europe necessarily, but it's pretty dismal right now. And, I say this as somebody who was raised as a social guy. It's just such a different world now that I don't necessarily feel as connected to as I wish it was. But just because everybody seems to be on their tiptoes in expectancy, I guess, of a dismal future. To put it shortly, again, like I said, I try and keep my entertainment, especially in regards to when it dips into political subject matter, as openly relevant as possible in order to engage with an audience, right? In some cases, maybe I can't help but, state my feelings on something or my worldview, but I try and do so as respectfully and as humbly as possible. But still, I try and be intentional when I say I don't like talking about politics for the most part. I mean it. Anyway, I won't necessarily go into the deep dive of why, those dynamics have changed over time, but I'm just kind of like, Times change, people. So as I was saying, this song, though, deals with the topic of government manipulation. At least the website I referenced earlier states that outright. However that's depicted, we'll see, or realized in the song, because we're about to entertain the visualizer as well together. So that'll probably give us plenty of dimension, too, on the particular plot this song is driving at. And again, I haven't read it in depth, just on the key inspiration. I did wonder originally if there was a double meaning, because I'm like, well, speaking as a religious guy, like, you will never be our God. And that was kind of the image that came up. And I don't know if that's maybe something that they're going for, and more so the government manipulation is the central theme. I think it might be, but it was just kind of funny to read that. And in the spirit of the song, it's a creative way to phrase it on part of standing against being retooled for simplicity's sake by a opposing totalitarian force or regime, whatever you want to call it. I like originality. XANDRIA certainly has that in sound and dimension and craftsmanship and capability. I've been very impressed on the music side, but lyrically as well. I'm really engaged to entertain this song. And, I love, as I've said many times, when it comes to music groups I consult on this channel, points of first introductions. We're about to get that as well, perhaps. Maybe some of you will be in the same position that I'm in, or maybe you have heard of this artist. This is a never collaborative work on part, of course, with XANDRIA, and the guest appearance of, let me get the name right here, Ralf Scheepers. Again, if I'm getting the pronunciation wrong, please clarify down below. I welcome it, because I'd like to be correct in my articulation on the content that I produce. And he's from Primal Fear, which is a German heavy metal band. I am big into the metal scene, after all, and Germany has some pretty cool talents, especially on the folk metal regard and folk rock, and other personalities as well. Let me add a understanding for Primal Fear as well, at least on behalf of Ralph, and maybe I'll entertain them someday as well. I haven't seen their name come through in terms of recommendations, and many of you give me an extensive supply of names that I have cataloged at this point. Maybe I've missed them. I don't think so, though, but maybe we'll get to them one day. I'll keep that in mind as we entertain, perhaps for the first time, Ralph together on part of XANDRIA for a new piece. And I hope for many of you, approaching this at a varied respect and familiarity. I'm sure there'll be many of you longtime XANDRIA fans who are getting the respect, in this case, again, of a first-time listener, but maybe some of you are approaching XANDRIA on a first-name listen. I think you're going to be thrilled if you're into symphonic metal with dimension and creativity, especially on lyrical depth and message. I'm even more impressed with the song and the group. I can't wait to hear where this goes. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the video, and I hope you like them too. I really do. I think you will. 2 works in, I'm having a great time. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up, as I said, You Will Never Be Our God. Again, I love the name as it plays into the theme of the song. Again, if there's a double meaning, I don't know. And maybe in that case, I'd be like, well, I still reside on the belief side in terms of my faith, but I really like creative writing, and that has such a unique personality to me in the way it's written. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the video, and we'll get an introduction to that as well alongside the song. And if you're not familiarized with how I format coverage on this channel, I do try and accommodate listener taste to the best extent that I can. So if I'm sure you want to read along with what I'm presuming will be a brilliant narrative, you will have the lyrics available to you in the video feed. So no need to go find a separate tab. You'll see those pop up in a minute, and we'll transition along with the song as we navigate our way through it together for the first time. All right, more XANDRIA. I can't wait to hear more of them. I'm having such a great time. I love European groups, especially on first introductions. They've always impressed, and XANDRIA is just wowing me right now. I hope they do for you too, first-time listeners. Very specific on that quote to Orwell. So I would imagine there is probably a point of connection. You knew it was going somewhere. I mean, you started on a scream, which fits perfectly with the theme of the song, I think. The great integration. Very faithful in spirit. Great riff placement, too. This hits home for me on styling of the lyrics and message. Not necessarily on a political respect. Great diversified pacing on that. Changes your concentration on the song, but it keeps you engaged. And artistically speaking, it evolves a song beautifully. Interesting choices to bring in. Well, there could be a double meaning. It's interesting. It's a complex song for sure. And now that I look on it again with a deeper lens, there are some pretty specific religious motifs. Well, if there isn't a double meaning, again, or even if there is, it just emboldens the energy of a song, I think, especially on its central theme, makes it even more creative in approach. Great place for a break, too. Key change, okay, I wondered. Not necessarily in this one, but some of their past works. And they've stayed consistent. Really good vocal mixing. So we've got normal vocals mixed with a scream and an operatic. What a wonderful combination. That is very well written. You know, like I said, that's very interesting. The song, of course we got credits for that one. That's so extensive of a work. The complexity to it. Yeah, they're going over a cast list. 100%, it feels kind of like a mini-movie. So I guess it makes sense. Like, end of the film, the credits roll. Many of you know I cover cinema work on this channel quite often. At least I have over the years. And music is a relatively new presence. So that makes sense. Totally fits. On Dimension, like I said, we might come to this song and a project that focuses on social commentary from a variety of perspectives. And I could certainly see something along the political lines being seen in various different angles, right? I do try and keep my content accommodating at least of that, even if perhaps, you know, I've got my own moral principles in mind, perhaps in large part due to the faith I operate from, right? Coming from my Christian foundation. we all have very individualized regards for the songs we might entertain and the motifs that come alongside that, especially on explanation and further consideration. What I will say is whatever perspective you might fall into on certain, maybe the intention of the video, the ideas of it, and it does feel particularly relevant with the 2024 regard, the play on, I guess, American politics to some degree, perhaps from a different perspective, with some specific, it's very relevant. I mean, the examples that they cite, just to pick out a couple, are hotly brought up in discussion right now. Whatever it might be, again, in whatever circuit. I'm trying to be, as I said, as democratic here in focus, because many of you know, as I said, I don't like to get into politics. Which, when I consider this song, it has an even broader respective application. Now, while I might say, from the perspective, if you were to consider, because again, there are such strong religious motifs, and in the name, again, like I said, it comes across as being sort of a double meaning on religious grounds, I might take a bit of a contrarian perspective. But I will give credit to the writing of this song and its depth, because it strikes a chord with me, again, on a varied focus. And I love when songs permit this, that they are so open to explanation, even if there's a central narrative at play, and a vision in that respect. What she says, and I think anybody could agree with this. Now, of course, we operate under the constraints of what should be an idealized morality, right? And noble action. What's healthy in life. Where the first verse as she opens this song, or Amber, or I guess the band to say more generally, I've been in hell for many years, and all this time is lost on me for eternity. I try to take back what was mine, a prison they've made my mind my enemy. Now, that is very direct, again, like I said, in terms of government manipulation and what the song is surface level speaking to, and they do so quite adeptly. It's surface level might sound like a diss. I don't mean it to be in any way like, oh, it's too simple or something. No, this song has such depth to it. This, for me, I love songs that bring on an effect of catharsis, and to perhaps instill this in people in my general vicinity who never understood why I pushed into the metal scene so readily as a kid. And I'll tell you, I've always felt, like I've said many times, I've always been isolated when it comes to my peer group in that respect. I prefer catharsis, and the metal and rock scenes have such a drive at that. Whether it be in the secular scene or even the Christian scene as well. I come from especially both perspectives in regards to my foundations of experiencing rock and metal music. It's on broad level, the rock scene allows for such realism and message. And for someone like me, again, that doesn't necessarily have, some people might, find connection and revelation or growth in life, restoration perhaps even. I could, you throw in as many adjectives as you want. We might have different destinations. Some examples would probably be, I'm sure for many of you, I got somebody in my life, family or friends, that's been my my support system or my rock. Some of us might express, a faith perspective in that same respect as well. And I could attest to that too. But for me, on the people regard, I wouldn't connect it necessarily. I've had people that have been rocks in my life, notably one close friend of mine, but generally speaking, I've said this many times, music for me, like I said, is such a connection point in my life. I have always sought the healing that music can bring, especially for somebody like me who has been in positions of what this song might be abstractly talking about. And maybe not necessarily is directed, but it's written in such a way that it can be broadly approached. Because I read that first verse and how much do I want to say about this? Because I could really go in deep. I'm trying to keep this simple. But, man, it digs into you the more you think about it. When she says, I've been in hell for many years, march in line, the end of time, I won't die terrorized, you'll never be our God. Maybe, again, like I said, not in consideration of religion for me, but for people. I've said many times, and I've progressed much closer to where I wish to be, at least what I've aspired to. I had to go through, and this was sort of instilled by the changing climate, in the world in part, not literally the climate, but like the energy surrounding us in, general culture and the people, in our communities, and especially, I'd say, the American scene generally, our political landscape, and even broader than politics, just the world in itself and the overall negativity. I consider And while I would never wish it to be... Okay, let me phrase this properly. The last couple of years, starting with, a little earlier on, but it really took shape in late 2020. I consider, in part, while I would never wish something like COVID to be an appearance, the stopping of life was a blessing in disguise for me. Because I've been in hell for a very long time, and not a hell that I wish to be in. So, as I've been saying for a long time, I've been in a deconstruction, reconstruction phase in terms of healing that I've needed to do. And I'll give you the simple definition. When she says, like, where is it? A prison they've made my mind strikes immediately. I come from an abuse background. I dealt with emotional and psychological abuse for many years. And as a kid, I didn't even know about it. If we separate the political side of this motif, and we apply the song in different ways, which I love to do, keeping it faithful, of course, to the essence of articulation with the song, but retrofitting it to make it work according to the lives and the stories that we have, the lives we've lived. A prison that they've made my mind. This song just immediately connects. I love it when music does that. It just reaches into you and you're like, this is why I've said music for me just has a connection in my life that people don't. There are people in my life that knew about, what was going on, and they weren't necessarily participant to it, but no one really supported me for the most part. And I'm realizing this all the years later in reflection, just how extensive the damage was. And I've healed a lot. And in some ways I'm still progressing. It'll probably be a lifelong journey, honestly. When you're talking about abuse, it just ravages a person's life. And it could be from any respect, right? Like I said, I specifically regard emotional and psychological so people don't get it confused. Because there are broad respects of types of abuse that people might be like, well, if you say that, or say abuse, period, it could be like, it could go the lengths of physical or, heaven forbid, sexual. But that was not present in my life. It was not those dynamics. It was strictly emotional and psychological. But still, the consequences, anybody who comes from an abuse background can probably speak to how it ravages your life. Not everybody will, and it's sad, even though, speaking of social issues that matter, abuse still these days is seldom talked about, but it is such a plague in our world. And perhaps many of us, have lived our lives for a while in silence, about what we've been through, and our struggles are kept under a veil, right? But we've looked to find different agents of healing where perhaps people have not been there. This song for me it's just another example of a piece that just connects on that level. It's like there's music can be there for you. It's a wonderful practical aid of healing, right? And we have devices like that in the world from other artistic regards as well. The arts atmosphere can be so powerful. Sometimes maybe not so much. It depends on the artistic work, of course. But music is just such a powerful force that in my life, it's meant so much to me, right? And like I said, there's other destinations of where you could look to in life. You could look to people. You could look to your faith as well if you come from that perspective like I do. But I'm absolutely unapologetic about that. But there are creative devices in the world that can also have a beautiful, restorative, and connective agency to them. And music, I love it for that respect. And speaking in terms of abuse therapy, even before I knew that's what it was, even before that was told to me in late 2018 that this is what you were going through the entire time you thought there was just something wrong with you, and that it was some sort of internalized or born identity or character defect. A prison that they made my mind. Yeah, in the deconstruction and reconstructive journey I've been on, I am opening up a prison that I've been inserted into that I never wished to be. And I'm realizing just how thick those bars have been. So a song like this was such a creative, individualized spirit. And I could see, this song maybe being interpreted in different directions. Right? Well, I still think it's valuable to keep and respect moral convention, because you could take this to be like, again, you're speaking about, self-empowerment. It could go into aspects that some of us might be like, well, maybe it's going a bit too far. But then in many cases, especially if it's healthy and if it's necessary, like abuse therapy is, it's vital. So a song with the path of this piece demonstrates, just again, like I said, it immediately gels. I love it so much already. I can't wait to re-listen to it again, examine the depth, and just experience that feeling again. They tried to break my will to live. Speaking especially in the political point, it's funny to me. I'll keep this short. In respect to what I'm realizing about what the abuse welcomed. I said earlier on, I used to have a political interest. Would you believe if I said it was actually a byproduct of the abuse? It's really funny. And it's part of the reason I've said now I'm making an effort to shy away. Well, I still keep, an informed lens on what's happening in the world. I don't think it's, fair to be absent and completely, distant from, this is the world around me. I think it means something to understand maybe the hurts and the tribulations people might be going through, or just the, what's of popular discussion. I'm realizing now that as a teenager, I developed a political interest, and not out of desiring wholesome and healthy change and restoration in the world for people, who might be dealing with some adversity, or there might be some sort of issue we need to discuss. I mean, some issues to me still matter. Again, I think more so on a moral perspective now, but I do a political one, even though there are, of course, intersection points. I intentionally try and stay away from politics because I realize now how much of a foothold the abuse had in my life, and how it manifested my interest in politics, if you believe that's what it was. Because I wanted a sense of fellowship. Like I said, I'm particularly disconnected on part, that's what abuse can do to you. But people just weren't there for me. And I tried to get that feeling of, for lack of a better term, because I'm reluctant to use it because it's so overused these days, and I tend to be more originalist, at least in the way I like to articulate my thoughts. I wanted to have a sense of community around me. And so I literally got into politics of an interest, and my social media habits. I hate myself now for the way I used to be in expression. It's part of the reason I completely deleted my Facebook. Like, I am not going back to that hellhole. I mean, when I think back again, like I said, that was, no one would probably know this if I didn't say it, but that was the effective abuse on full display. Because where did my political interest come from? A desire for people to be around me and to connect. That was part of the prison. And honestly, I probably lost a lot of relationships because of my effort to try and appease people to be friends to me that never really cared to be, and that as a consequence of the abuse, it's an inherent need for me, and I hate this. I hate that I can't turn it off. It's just an automatic in my brain. But if you can understand, like I said, if I went into more specifics, I'm not going to. Maybe I will one day. If you can understand the dynamics, you would be able to follow exactly why my brain works this way. And again, you want to talk about freeing yourself out of prison? I'm still seeing signs, but I'm still in some aspects there. But I have this inherent need to be valued. I hate that. I hate that I cannot be at least... Well, I've progressed a lot. Especially with this channel, I will say this. It's over 7 years I've developed this thing. It's an escape for me. And it is an opportunity to, in large part, you wouldn't know this if I acknowledged it, or if I didn't acknowledge it, but self-restoration. Just me producing this content as well. Even if we're enjoying a great music group together in that respect, just talking about my thoughts is freeing enough. This is helping me. This is an agent of catharsis directly. And as I was saying, I look on where my political interest came from. I wanted people to acknowledge me and to be in their favor and their good graces. I would have been better off just being me, if I could have been that. But the concept of who I was so mutilated. Anyway, not literally, but in every psychological sense. I didn't think that's where we'd be going with this song, but like I said, the way it's written just, okay, songs provoke certain discussion, especially on depth, and this piece is pretty vast in consideration. Again, on the political grounds, you might interpret it, your own way. And again, I'm not going to go into that point of topic, though even watching the video, I will say it takes an interesting angle, and though, I might necessarily have some points of, reservation based on the point of view I have in certain respects, we can talk about that perhaps in a different day, but I'll say this, I try and avoid politics. So if there's other angles to appreciate, and there are, the imagining of this piece, especially on part of the vocal layering, that really impressed me, especially towards the last iteration of the chorus between Amber and Ralph. mixture of traditional vocals and of scream and operatic balance. And the piece plays around, that range across the board, but still, like, to have all three of those, and probably more, I would imagine, on different tonalities. I mean, I come from, as I've said many times, a music connoisseur angle, not a musician. I wish I could speak to that angle in greater depth. I try and approximate. But to layer all three, I mean, I don't even know where to start in terms of my feelings on it, because it was just wonderful. But the pacing to the song, highly effective, very engaging beat, especially on the introduction. It's much slower, and then it just gets to this rough ballad of beautiful instrument use and structuring with a captivating, deep, and broader than I imagine in some respects narrative that connects, perhaps, in very interesting ways. I mean, don't fault me for being very original. I notice things about music, especially, music can be a very subjective enjoyment, right, and how it connects to you. And You Will Never Be Our God, I mean, has so many points of perhaps consideration that we might, take in or, diverge from. What this song does for me as the healing agent, and even in the religious symbolism, I mean, again, like I said, there might be points we take and points we leave, but you can't fault at least good writing and eloquence. I will say that on styling. It's really interesting. There are so many points for deep consideration on this song. I mean, it'd be hard to entangle every point of it. It requires deeper analysis, and maybe even on repeat listens, it'll bring more to my attention. I'm curious what you think of it. I'd love to hear about it down below, as well as the angle of approach you take. Longtime XANDRIA fan, first entrance. How do you feel about the piece? Let me know down below. Let's share a discussion on it, and perhaps what it's driving at for us individual presences and personalities. Because the depth of it, truly, I didn't think it would go down that far in terms of social commentary. In a broad respect, I mean, it's got that personality, of course, especially in the visualizer as well. I'm still surprised at its range of coverage. That song is extensive in how it possibly could apply and touch somebody. I mean, if there ever is a good testament to what I've said about rock music and metal music being so cathartic, perhaps, look no further than You Will Never Be Our God. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.